So measurement. So in this lesson, students will be able to identify and measure and calculate length. So we're going to focus on length in this particular lesson. So measurements are really important. Why are measurements important? They're important basically because we use them to construct the society around us. So for example, when measurements are not made accurately, we end up with mistakes like this. Also as well, for technology, for example, putting satellites into space, we use a lot of measurement as well to calculate trajectory and to even build the satellites as well. So all of these technologies are part of modern society, and they're made possible by the ability of humans to make measurements. So we have two kind of systems. We have what's known as the metric system and the imperial system. So the imperial system is kind of outdated and it's trying to be replaced with what's called a metric system. So basically what scientists are trying to do and governments are trying to do across the world is they're trying to get it so that we're using just one unit, if you like, or one metric in order to measure the different quantities. So this system is what's known as the International System of Units, or SI units, and it's most widely used system of measurement. So the units and their physical quantities are, so for example, you have seconds for time, you have the meter for measurement of length, so we're going to focus on that in this class, in this lesson, the kilometer for mass, the kilogram for mass, the ampere for electrical current, the Kelvin for temperature, the mole for the amount of a substance, and the candela for the luminous intensity. So other measurements such as speed, which is in meters per second, are based around calculations on these basic units as well. So we're going to focus specifically on length. So as science students, you need to be able to measure length. So these are some of the instruments that you will use in order to be able to measure different lengths. So the distance between 2 points is measured in, so it can either be measured depending on how big the distance is in millimeters, centimeters, meters, or kilometers. So the objects that we use then to measure length are, so we can use a tape measure, we can use an opussometer, which is this guy here, which we can use to measure the distance between, let's say, 2 points that and where there's a curve. We can use a meter stick, we can use vernier calipers, and then if the distance is pretty big, we can use this thing called a trundle wheel. So basically, the unit of length, so a basic way to kind of think about it is just the distance between 2 points. So if I have point A here, and if I have point B here, the distance between these 2 points is what's known as the length. Now, depending on how we get to these 2 points will determine the type of instrument you use and also the distance between these 2 points. So for example, if you take, for example, the distance, so let's say if this is the Earth and this is the Sun, okay, you're talking about 98 million miles between these 2 points, okay? So let's say this is the Earth. Okay, so you have that distance, so it's over 98 million miles. Okay, so you're not going to be able to get a measuring tape to measure that distance between those 2 points. Now, if you have then, so let's say if this was a human here, okay, so and there's a distance between here and here, so you're talking about microns, okay, so you're talking about microns, which is this unit that they use to measure very, very small distances between 2 points. So again, length is distances between 2 points, and depending on how big the distance is, determines the type of instrument that you can use to measure the distance. So if we take, for example, so imagine this is a rugby pitch, so we have the set of goals between either points, so you have a fairly big distance here between these 2 points here, so point A and point B. So if you're measuring something like the distance between, let's say, like big distances like this between the uprights, let's say on a rugby pitch, you'd use this guy here, which is known as a trundle wheel. And you just push this along, and basically every time it moves around, it clocks up the distance that you've moved. And what this does is it allows you to easily measure the distance between 2 points if the distance is pretty large. And normally it's measured in kilometers. So if we take, so for example, so 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. So this kilo means 1,000. And when you see that in front of a unit, it basically means 1,000. So 1 kilometer means 1,000 meters. So this guy here is what's known as an opstometer, and basically what that does is it's to measure, let's say if you have a curve that's like this. Okay, so point A starts here and point B starts here. So what you can do is you can use this and you can run this along here, and then you can determine the number of revolutions, and you can work out then the distance between these 2 points on a curved line. And where is this kind of useful? So if you're reading, for example, maps. So if you're trying to get the distance on a map, for example, of a curvy, windy road, you can use an opstometer to measure those distances. And then you have this guy here, a vernier caliper. So basically this is another instrument that you can use. So let's say if you had, let's say, a piece of metal, and it can measure things fairly accurately as well. So what you can do is you can use this vernier caliper to get the distance between, let's say, these 2 points here as well. So for example, on a piece of metal that's like a circular piece of metal, or anything like that where you need to get like a very accurate measurement, you can get the distance between 2 points, like very small accurate measurements. Also as well, this, so you're able to do measure something like that using this side here. Also as well, you have this side here as well, and this enables you to measure the distance between, like, let's say if you had, let's say, a piece of copper pipe, something like this. Okay, and this is a piece of copper pipe and it's open. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to get the distance between here and here. So measure that diameter. So you can use this side of the vernier caliper to measure that as well. So again, all of these things here, all of these measurements that we're looking at is measuring length. So it's measuring the distance between 2 points, so point A and point B. And depending on what the distance is, you would have different instruments that you'd use to measure the length. But again, measuring the length of things is it's a very fundamental unit of measure, or a very fundamental quantity to measure. So as junior cert scientists, you need to be comfortable being able to use a measuring tape and to use these instruments to measure the length between 2 points. And again, what's very important as well is these units. So you have millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. So it's important that you're comfortable with these units and how to, like, what unit to use when you're measuring, let's say, different distances between point A and point B. So kilometer and meter are used to measure fairly big distances. Millimeters and centimeters are used to measure very small distances. So that is length, and that is one quantity that you need to be able to measure when it comes to your junior certificate.